Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I want you to take a second and think about what you might have been doing when you were, I don't know, let's say 21. Think about that for a second. I've got a visual in my mind. I know what I was doing. I was working, partying with my friends, a little bit of school here and there. This guy over here was a major worldwide recognized tennis pro. Now he's an accomplished architect in the New York area. But yeah, he was playing the best of the best back in the day. And that's what I found out. We started talking about architecture. And then John Riggio brings up this whole tennis career that he had when he was in his teens and early 20s. And he's back with us again today. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Great. Hi, Steve. How's you?
Things are good. Things are good. And it's pretty amazing that I come to find out that Ross Perot, presidential candidate who had an affection for tennis back in the 80s, was a guy that recognized your tennis ability, right?
Yes, he did. And so from the last time I was talking about the Perot company, and I could really expand on what happened there with the Ross Perot. I was starting to remember all the different things. And what happened with the old Westbury courts, that's SUNY Westbury on Long Island in New York, we were able to use those courts. The Perot company carved off the whole area around the courts, and they built these tent buildings, these white tent buildings. And so that set up a safe area for us to play tennis. And they had the manager there overseeing the whole operation going on, and it was working really excellent. So while the whole courts were carved off and I was playing tennis, they had a helicopter land within the area near the tennis courts. And so people got out and they went over and they were watching me play. And one of them was really Ross Perot. He came all the way in person on a helicopter, and he watched me play. He waved over to me. And after he watched me play for a while, we got back in the helicopter and left. And that's really what had happened with Ross Perot coming to my court. So that is really good. And so I think that shows that that is that I was playing there, and that was their real number one tennis investment there, with me playing and watching playing and everything.
At that moment when Ross had landed the helicopter and he waved to you, so you were his tennis investment at that time?
Yes, he was the sponsor, the lead sponsor, in buying over my contract and running the whole sport production we had there. And now I think he already had sport production in place. They already had a team of people. They had managers and things like that. So it isn't the first time he's doing this. He has years of experience. And then they came down there, and they had like 4 kids also playing tennis with them. And they came with them from there. I think the team came from Texas. So I was playing tennis with them. And really, my contract at $26.5 million were very large compared to any of the other players. I think most of the players only had maybe $100,000 contract, something like that. And so we were playing there, and they also had a tennis teacher with them. And the tennis teacher, I talked to him, and he pointed out a couple of things, trying to make even more improvements to my playing, even though I was playing great. And so that was good. And I remember playing one match. I played one match against one of the team members, and we finished the match. We walk off the court, and their tennis instructor, he goes, "Who won the match?" And I said, "I won the match." And she looks at me and he points to himself and he says, "No, I won the match." He's the tennis teacher. So he said he won the match. So then
never fight with the teacher. The teacher's always right. Just say yes.
Yes. So what was happening there at Old Westbury is they were asking me my input on how to play these tournaments, the ATP tournaments. And I was telling them about things like the administrative coach, connecting with the U.S. Tennis Center to get and other ATP tournaments to get them playing. And so I was giving them advanced knowledge of really how to play the ATP and play with the US Tennis Center. So that idea started to take hold. They started to make some changes. They eventually were able to get me in on the ATP tournaments like I requested. Instead of staying there not knowing what to do, I really gave them definite information. And I started to play tournaments. I remember winning at least 5 tournaments. So the setup was more like Sutton East at that point. We were able to get all the top players to start to come to the old Westbury courts and start playing matches. And this started to happen for a while. And while I was there, since I was really a big star with that size contract, it's a very large contract. Most people don't have any contract even close to $26.5 million. It's very large. A lot of entertainers showed up. I remember one entertainer was Kevin Klein. He showed up, and Robbie Cates was there too. And so I met other entertainers there. They came to watch me playing there. And they were all like entertainers also that really had large contracts too. And some of them might have had something to do with Ross Perot's company. Some might not have had anything to do with them. And so I was there and I met different entertainers coming and backgammon. And then so I was playing there and I was winning really great. Things were going really good. And then some of the players I played, like for instance, when we still had these 4 players they brought with them, one player showed up to play one of the tournaments that we started. This was early on, and he was Mats Wilander. Now Mats Wilander I played before, and so the other players were really impressed. They all got his autograph. They all had his autograph signed when I was there. And then we played the match. Now, I think they weren't sure what was going to happen, but I won the match very confidently. And so these other players, when they saw that happen, they were really starting to believe what's going on, that this isn't a joke. I really have a $26.5 million contract, really #1 player. And they really couldn't believe it. They were so amazed with it. And then so from there, so other players started to play, and as we got into this with the ATP, the head manager there was really impressed with it. He could see it was generating a lot of money. They're already making a lot of money now playing these ATP matches. The top names are coming already to play from the tournaments, and the other 4 players that they had them leave. So they weren't around, and then they started to get an idea of maybe getting some other players involved that are more like ATP players. So they had one player came over, and he didn't come from the parking lot like the other players. He walked around the tents. They had all those white tents set up. So he was someone that they were going to sponsor. They're thinking about sponsoring him, maybe make a larger team of ATP players. So he came down. I played a match with him. It was a good match, and I won the match. And I think since I won the match, this opponent he left, but he didn't return. And then later I was to find out what his name was, because I was using the name Carlos Scipio, and he was Andre Agassi, which I already knew from years ago. So we had a nice match, and but he didn't want to return to the team anymore, and so that was working good. So with all these matches, also my name was listed as Carlos Scipio, and they weren't necessarily revealing what my natural name is, because everyone already knew my natural name, but they didn't really reveal it. So when we were playing the matches, we didn't know necessarily each other's names on purpose. And then if I use a name, it was Carlos Scipio. So they weren't sure if it was who it was, who was the natural name involved. So that was one factor involved with this. It was just a replay of a lot of matches that I was already playing, a lot of tournaments. In fact, some of these tournaments are the 5 I had already won over the years, maybe 8 times. Some of them I've already won repeatedly those tournaments. So I already had the ability to win those tournaments, and they were all against the top players, top name players. One thing that happened is as we progressed with these tournaments, they even had the two Japanese investors were there. I met them in person. They came down. They shook hands with them, and they were there and they watched me play a lot of matches and things like that. And while I was there, I even played a nice match with Ivan Lendl. I won the match against Ivan Lendl, and they were really the investors watching were ecstatic. They were really happy about it, and so my ranking was still staying up there, wasn't really going down, and my winning percentage that whole chapter with the Ross Perot company was starting to move up. So my improvements that I was making, I even went above only losing one match over 30. I think at the time they might have calculated a 1 out of 34, but it might fluctuate a little. So my playing was going up. It was getting even better. And that was really good. And they were really happy about this whole thing. So that is something that was happening there.
All these names, I got to tell you, John, even you mentioned a name that you haven't said before, Mats Wilander. And I completely remember that name. Of course, Andre Agassi. I can't imagine what it must have felt like where, you have these other players watching you play these other players, which are top notch. And at that time, how old were you? 19, 20?
When I was playing the Ross Perot company, I was already 23 years old. I was 23 years old.
You're almost retired at that point. No, seriously, 23. That's insane. All right. So at that time, the other players, somebody like Andre Agassi, about how old was he? Was he in his 30s by that point?
He's about my same age. I think he
Was
might
he
be even
really?
a year younger than me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Were the other players right around that age too?
Yeah, I think Lendl's maybe only 6 years older than me,
Okay.
and some players were older, some of them might have been younger.
Wow. Did you ever play any female players?
Over the years, I did play some female players. They weren't in any official tournament, and but I never lost any match against a female player. I won every match. I was able to play where the female players they weren't able to come close to beating me. Now, some female players that are ATP players can beat male pro players. Like I said years ago about like Courtney Pulitzer was an excellent player, and she was able to beat some of the guy players. And so a lot of females they can beat male players, but for myself, since I am an excellent player and stayed on top of playing, I never lost any match against any female players when I was younger.
Who were some of the big players of the day? Chrissy Everett, was that one of them from that time?
Yes, Chrissy Everett was one of the players. Helena Sokova, which I made friends with, she was one of the top players. Martina Navratilova was there too.
All over. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, these names are coming back. It seems like there's more female players nowadays. Maybe that's, Serena Williams, kind of paved that way. Wasn't back then, she might have been 70s. Billie Jean King. Is that right? Billie Jean King?
Yes, she was there. She was, I think, already in retirement, but she was there. I did play some warm up with
Yeah.
her. Yes, she was there.
She was very visible in the New York area back then, at least. You know what? You're right. Because now that I think back to it, this is how my brain works. I'm chronologizing or putting it in chronological order. Elton John's song Philadelphia Freedom came out in 1975, and that song was about her. And she had already been a force by then. So, yeah, I guess, by the time, we're into the 80s, yeah, she was on her way to retirement. Wow, incredible. It's just amazing. Yeah. They needed to make a song about you, John, after all of this.
Yes.
So Ivan Lendl, tell me about him and your dealings with him and you've played matches with him or against him?
Yes, well, I think I said a whole piece about Ivan Lendl was my tennis instructor when I just made it as a adult player, and he went through and taught me all the things from going from a junior player to an adult player. So I went through a number of weeks with him of playing, and he was helping me out, things like that.
I want to make your brain work for a second, John. And by the way, we're talking with John Riggio. He's an accomplished architect in the New York area, but also a tennis pro back when he was in his 20s. Out of all the players that you were with, and they gave you advice along the way every once in a while, what's the one best, biggest piece of advice a professional player ever gave you? Anything stand out in your mind? Whether it was your form, your swing, financial advice, whatever it might be. Is there anything that you remember that kind of stuck with you since then?
Um,
Or what did you pick up on?
I think one advice that I did receive that was very important was by Ivan Lendl, and he was saying not to listen to the opponent, to just play and to win the game. And
So don't focus on the competition, just do your thing. Just
yeah, not let anyone try to make any deals with you, things like that. Just
okay.
to play your best game and win the game. And at that level, that is really what people are looking for. They want to see that you're playing an honest game. You're gonna win the game, and you're not gonna be distracted.
Have you ever been injured?
I playing tennis, I had a lot of injuries starting off, but they all were able to heal. I used to go to my doctor, Dr. De Pasqua, and he was an excellent sport doctor. He was also the sport doctor for Muhammad Ali and some other baseball players, professional baseball players. And most of my injuries were able to heal on their own. I had all kinds of different pulls, tennis elbow, things like that. And
Would you say you had those injuries earlier in your tennis career?
yes, a lot of them were when I was very young, when I was still a junior. I went through a whole thing of all these injuries as a junior, and a lot of them were learning how not to get injured to play. So I used to sprain my ankles. I used to run so fast, I used to fall over, sprain my ankles.
Hmm.
Tennis elbow, shoulder elbow, pulled ligaments, hips pulled, hamstring pulled muscles, all kinds of things like that. Used to go to my doctor, who was a sport doctor,
Okay.
and he almost all everything I was able to make some corrections, like maybe I'd put even like I had a thing where, like, say your racket would hit your knee, so you end up putting a shield over your knee and things like that for a while until you correct it where you don't have your racket hit your knee when you're serving. I mean, it could really, like crack your kneecap. So I used to really go through all kinds of things. A lot of them were learning injuries. I was able to try to correct how I was playing so I wouldn't injure myself. So the thing with the spraining my ankles in particular, in fact, I used to have to tape up my ankles with like ace bandages for a while to make sure that I wouldn't have that problem with spraining my ankles, things like that. So all those type of things were going on, and a lot of them were like injuries that I was able to learn from and make it where I tried to reduce my injuries, that I wasn't really injuring myself, and that would affect my playing. And of course, I was always told by the doctor the same thing, that if you injure yourself too badly, pull ligaments, things like that, it could really affect your career, where you playing would have to stop. I've noticed from playing professional tennis, a number of the players did have really bad ligament pulls, things like that, and it ended up really ending their career. They weren't able to recover from the injuries. So that was one thing uh, I had noticed, and I had learned about how to play and not really to hurt myself. And this whole thing with knowing, like, your muscles, like if your muscles starting to tighten up, then you want to take a drink of water so your muscles aren't going to tighten up. And it always worked, things like that. Because if you went too far and then you got a cramp, you could really cause a big problem for yourself. You could lose a match. maybe you'd even pull your muscles worse. Well, then you're out playing and maybe even in your career. So that is one thing that was happening with injuries. So at the time that I was like 23 years old with the Ross Perot Company, I was really all aware of all those injuries, and I really did not have any injuries at all during the months I played with them. I was able to stay injury free.
I am still blown away by what you just said before when you served that there's a potential for hitting your kneecap. I didn't even think about that. And I play tennis, maybe once every month, if that, but I didn't even think about how you could slam your kneecap. Wow.
Yes, yes, because when you're trying at that age, trying to swing the racket very fast and get the ball over, your whole body's moving forward, and the racket comes down and hit you right on the kneecap. So I had to put up a shield over my kneecap for a while till I corrected the problem. I finally figured out how to make it where I wasn't hitting my knee all the time.
Obviously, I don't serve that well, so I don't have to worry about that at all. But yeah, these are things that you don't think of when you watch a tennis match. They make it look easy. I know it's a cliche, but you have no idea the amount of practice, the experience, the speed, the power, the agility that goes into a game when somebody's playing a professional tennis game. Have they ever done radar on any of your serves or any of your hits to see how fast the ball's going?
I think one time they did use a something to check the speed of my serve. I think it was going over 200 miles per hour for what they told me, but I'm not 100% certain. I didn't see it against myself.
Well, coming from a guy who breaks rackets, on a serve or a hit, and that includes wood and metal rackets or aluminum. They were aluminum, right?
Yeah, and then yeah, they have wood rackets, aluminum rackets. Then they have the metal racket, which is a metal that's manufactured.
I'm going to ask a technical question here, but what's the difference between a wood racket and a metal or aluminum racket? What's the preference? What's yours? Why would you choose one over the other?
I think the wood rackets originally were very good. They are well made. They have really pro wood rackets. I think what happens is they really aren't fairly that stiff and can really take as much bending compared to the metal racket. The metal racket is like metal made with graphite, and it's manufactured where they put the racket together, and from there they that racket is seems to be a lot better than the wood racket. So they phased out the wood racket. I think the wood rackets were probably prone to warping. You had to put the brace over the top of the racket
So
because
they don't, I want to make sure because I bought a racket. Obviously, it was aluminum. Um, they don't make wood rackets anymore or not?
I don't think they really make them anymore. No. And then
Wow.
there's one thing about an aluminum racket is like an aluminum racket, like extruded aluminum, is made differently than the composite metal racket or
Mhm.
composite that has graphite in it. And what that is, I saw some videos of how they make the composite racket. It's really made from powder, and it's a special manufacturing process that they make the metal rackets. It is an extruded metal. Aluminum is more of an extruded metal that they bend. So like the original aluminum rackets were like extruded metal, but the metal and the graphite is really like a powder it has a manufacturing process, and it molds into a metal racket. That's how they make them,
I
and
mean,
they've improved them over the years.
I said I bought an aluminum racket. Honestly, I have no idea. I know it was a metal type of metal. It was cheap because I'm not a great player. But I'm looking here, John. We're just about out of time. I want to tell everybody your website, John Riggio, RIGGIO.com, has all of the tennis memorabilia pictures and such on there. It's his architecture site, but what is the link? Do you recall the link if you want to get in to see the tennis pictures?
Yes, I have it here. The link is is johnriggio.com/tennispro/index.html. And that is where you can find that. Or you can find it on Facebook too.
Yeah. Great stories. And for me, I mean, it just kind of takes me back to when I was young and hearing all these names, because these were all the names that you mentioned, Lendl, Agassi, on and on and on. They were equatable with, you could think of, major baseball or football players. They were all up there, top
And
of the
one thing about rackets is now the metal rackets, they also have something called a pro stock racket. And that is a better quality racket. Usually the stringing weight on the racket, my rackets were usually only strung to 62 pounds. And they sort of had a maximum with the ATP of stringing it to about 65 pounds. And so that's the kind of racket stringing I was using. It was 62 pounds racket. It's a pro stock racket. And it didn't have any stripes or lines on it. It was completely a black racket. You could put your own decals on there if you want for advertising. That is the racket that I was using, and most pros are using a similar type of racket.
I'm going to get a black nondescript racket, and I'm going to put John Riggio Architect and advertise your business on my racket.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Why not? John, pleasure talking with you. I love catching up with you, and looking forward next time we talk.
Great, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.